History does not forgive, nor does it forget. The ink of betrayal stains deeper than the blood of war, and in the grand halls of power, deception is more dangerous than a blade. This is the story of a queen, one who was loved by her people, cherished by her court, and trusted by her king. Yet, behind the golden veil of her majesty, she carried a secret so dark that it threatened to unravel the very foundation of her kingdom. Some say she was a woman of passion, ruled by desires stronger than her duty. Others claim she was a mastermind, a queen who played the game of thrones with the cunning of a serpent. But when the truth was revealed, the kingdom was left in ruins, and the queen, once adored, became the most despised ruler in history. What could drive a queen to betray the very kingdom she swore to protect? Was it love? Was it revenge? Or was it something far more sinister? Prepare yourself, for this is not a tale of glory, it is a tale of treachery. And by the end of it, you will question everything you thought you knew about loyalty, power, and the cost of ambition. It was the late 15th century, an era of flourishing trade, grand architecture, and a monarchy that stood unchallenged. The kingdom of Valandria was one of the wealthiest realms in the land, its people thriving under the rule of King Aldric III. He was a man of wisdom, a ruler of great strength, and above all, a husband who adored his wife, the queen. Her name? Queen Isolde. To the world, Isolde was the very image of elegance. She was beloved by the people, worshipped by poets, and admired by noblemen across the continent. When she walked through the marble halls of the palace, her presence alone commanded attention. But behind the embroidered silks and jeweled crowns, behind the careful smiles and diplomatic grace, there was something else. A secret. One that, if uncovered, would shake the kingdom to its core. But the question remains, where does betrayal begin? Was it in the whispered meetings behind locked doors? In the stolen glances that no one was supposed to see? Or did it begin much earlier, in a heart that had never truly belonged to the king? What happens when a queen's heart beats not for her husband, not for her throne, but for something far more dangerous? At first glance, Queen Isolde was everything a kingdom could desire in a ruler's wife. She was graceful in court, charitable to the poor, and endlessly devoted to the image of a perfect queen. The nobles admired her elegance. The common folk praised her kindness. And the king, King Aldric III, he worshipped her. Yet, beneath the surface of grandeur and devotion, the queen carried a burden. A secret she dared not confess, not even to the ones closest to her. Because if she did, it would mean the end of everything. But betrayal is never sudden, is it? It creeps in like a shadow at dusk, so subtle, so silent, that even those who are watching closely fail to notice it, until it is too late. And for Queen Isolde, the moment of betrayal began long before anyone knew to look. It started with a name. A name that should have never been spoken in the queen's chambers. A name that, if uttered aloud, would be enough to brand her a traitor. Sir Lucien Devereux. A man who did not belong to her. Sir Lucien Devereux was no ordinary man. He was a warrior, a man of unwavering loyalty, to his king, to his country. His name was sung in battle hymns, whispered in admiration among noblewomen, and feared by the enemies of Valandria. He had sworn an oath to King Aldric. An oath of loyalty, of duty, of obedience. But what happens when a knight is forced to choose between the crown and the woman who wears it? No one knows when it started. Perhaps it was on a stormy evening when Lucien entered the queen's chambers, bearing news from the battlefield. Rain dripped from his armor, his cloak heavy with the weight of war. The queen, standing by the fire, looked at him, not as a subject, not as a knight, but as a man. Perhaps it was the stolen glances across the grand feasts, the way their eyes would meet, lingering just a moment too long. Or perhaps it was inevitable. Because some betrayals are not planned. Some unfold like fate itself, an unstoppable force destined to tear everything apart. And Queen Isolde's betrayal? It had already begun. But desire alone is not treason. No, treason requires more. A choice. And soon, the queen would make one that could never be undone. A man who should not have mattered. A man who, in the end, would change the course of the kingdom's history forever. Affairs of the heart can be hidden, for a time. But in a palace where eyes and ears lurk in every corner, secrets are merely lies waiting to be exposed. The queen thought she was careful. She thought no one noticed the way her hand would brush against Lucian's when no one was watching. She thought the letters, sealed with wax and hidden in the folds of her gowns, would never be discovered. She thought no one could hear the soft footsteps echoing through the halls late at night. But she was wrong. Because in a kingdom ruled by power, there are always those who wait in silence, ready to strike at the first scent of weakness. And one of those shadows belonged to Duchess Eleanor, the king's most trusted advisor. A woman who had spent years fighting for her place at court. A woman who knew the true nature of betrayal, because she had seen it before. And this time, she would not stay silent. It was at a grand feast, beneath the flickering candlelight and the scent of spiced wine, that Duchess Eleanor made her move. She approached the king, her voice laced with careful concern. "Your Majesty, have you ever questioned the loyalty of those closest to you?" King Aldrich frowned. He was a ruler of steel and fire, a man who trusted few. But in all his wisdom, there was one thing he never doubted, his wife. "What are you suggesting, Eleanor?" The Duchess leaned in closer, her lips curling into the faintest of smiles. A queen's heart should belong only to her king, should it not? That was all it took. A single seed of doubt planted in the mind of a ruler. A seed that, if left to grow, would destroy everything in its path. What does a king do when his faith is shaken? He watches. He listens. And then, when the moment is right, he strikes. The queen never saw it coming. She did not notice the guards positioned carefully outside her chambers. She did not hear the quiet footsteps in the corridor as she whispered forbidden words into Sir Lucian's ear. She did not realize that her world was about to collapse. Not until the doors burst open. Not until she saw the fury in the king's eyes. Not until Lucian drew his sword, not against the king, but against the guards. In that instant, the betrayal was complete. The queen had not only betrayed her husband. She had betrayed the kingdom. And now, there would be consequences. For a moment, time stood still. The queen's lips parted in shock. Lucian's blade hovered in the air, caught between duty and love. The guards hesitated, waiting for the king's command. And then, chaos. "Seize them." King Aldrich's voice thundered through the chamber, shaking the very walls. The guards surged forward, swords drawn, ready to cut down the queen's forbidden lover. But Lucian was no ordinary knight. Steel clashed against steel as he fought like a man possessed, not for honor, not for victory, but for her. The queen, her heart pounding, reached for his hand. "We must go, now." This was it. Their only chance. If they could make it past the palace gates, if they could reach the harbor, if they could disappear into the night, perhaps they could rewrite their fate. But fate had already made its decision. Because treason does not go unpunished. And the queen's betrayal? It had been seen by too many eyes. The corridors of the palace echoed with the sound of pursuit. Torches flickered against the stone walls as guards poured in from every direction. Their escape route was cut off. Lucian turned to her, his breathing ragged. "Isolde, there is no way out." But the queen refused to surrender. "There is always a way." She grabbed his hand, desperation flashing in her eyes. They would not take her. They would not take him. Not like this. But sometimes, love is not enough. Because betrayal always comes at a cost. And hers was about to be paid in blood. They reached the palace courtyard, where the rain poured from the heavens as if the gods themselves mourned what was to come. Surrounded. The guards formed a circle, swords glinting under the storm. And at the center stood King Aldrich. Drenched in rain, his face was unreadable, but his eyes burned with something far worse than rage. Cold, merciless justice. Kneel. His command was not loud, but it carried the weight of the kingdom itself. Lucian did not kneel. Instead, he raised his sword once more. For her. For the woman who had stolen his heart. For the queen who had sealed his fate. And then, one final clash. The fight lasted only moments. One mistake. One opening. The king's sword plunged forward. Lucian staggered. The queen screamed. And then, silence. Lucian fell to his knees, his fingers trembling as he reached for her one last time. Blood spilled into the rain-soaked ground, staining the royal crest beneath him. The queen ran to him, cradling his face. "Stay with me." But his eyes were already fading. And then, he was gone. Her night. Her love. Her downfall. The king did not speak. He did not have to. His silence was the sound of a sentence passed, a fate decided. The queen, now drenched in rain and sorrow, lifted her gaze. "Kill me." But King Aldrich did not grant her such mercy. "No," he said coldly. "You will live. And you will watch everything you once had burned to the ground." And with that, the queen was dragged from the palace, stripped of her crown, her jewels, her dignity. The people who once sang her praises now spat at her feet. The woman who had once been adored was now a traitor. And her punishment? Banishment. Not death. No, death would have been too kind. Instead, she was cast out into the wilderness, left to wander in exile, a fallen queen with nothing but memories of what she had lost. Her love. Her throne. Her kingdom. And in the end, no one remembered the woman she once was. They only remembered the title history had given her. The queen that betrayed her own kingdom. Years passed. Decades. The kingdom moved on. But legends do not die. To this day, the tale of Queen Isolde is whispered among the halls of Valandria. Some say she was a victim of fate. A woman who followed her heart and paid the price. Others say she was a villain. A queen who valued passion over duty and doomed her own people. And perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. But let me ask you, what would you have done? Would you have chosen love over loyalty? Would you have risked everything for desire? Or would you have played the role expected of you, no matter the cost? Because in the end, history does not care for the hearts of those it condemns. It only remembers the betrayal. If you found this tale gripping, if it made you question loyalty, power, and the price of passion, then don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Because history is written by the victors. But the truth? It is carried in the whispers of those who still remember. Until next time.